All right. Okay, guys, we have a new book. Here we go. Don't worry about me. I flew out to France. I'm in the Grenoble Mountains, and you can see this is a really nice valley. I'm hang gliding, so don't I'm not afraid of heights, so don't worry about me. So I'm going to go through this book, which I love, Cave of the Moving Shadows, by Thomas Milstead. It's out of print, so if you want to find your own copy, they're kind of expensive, and you can look up used books or maybe try a library or something. Of course, we have the PDFs for you, so you can look at those and while we read. This is an outstanding book. We're studying early humans, and so this book goes along with it, and early humans will look at the different hominids of our distant ancestors. And anyway, so you look at the book, Cave of the Moon Shadows. It shows a little boy kind of in a cave there. You don't really get to see. One thing that I hope we put in there, and I don't think Mr. Placencia did, but I hope he did, is the map. There's a map in the book, and it kind of shows you where things are. So we'll look at that map. If it's not in there, we'll probably put a PDF in there for you, so you can be able to see what the Great Valley, the Forbidden Mountains, the others caves, Sabo's caves, the Notch, and Kimba's home cave, the river and streams. So you can kind of see where everything's at. It's a weird map because it's upside down. It faces south is at the top, and normally we go from, when we use a compass rose, it's north. Never eat soggy wheat or soggy waffles or sour wheat, whatever you want to say to do that. But when we get going here, the opening scene of this book takes place on the top of a plateau. And if you can see right that way over my shoulder, you can see a plateau, which is a cut off mountain. So I would say that Kimba was probably living in a valley very similar to this at that time. And he's on top of a plateau like that one, probably not quite as big as that one, but he is on a plateau that's similar. All right, and there's similar streams and rivers like you can see right behind me. So I better get started on this. We're going to read two chapters today, chapter 1 and chapter 2. So bear with me and we'll get through it. And glad to have you here. Welcome. All right, so chapter 1. A hawk swooped so low he could almost touch it. Then upward it sailed and all but vanished in the glare of the sun. Sprawled on top of the cliff, the boy shielded his eyes to watch it soar. How he thirsted to wheel and skim through the night or through the sky like that, to peer down at all there was below. Perhaps as if he imagined intently enough that he was the hawk, the power that Utrecht spoke of would actually enable him to look out through the eyes of that now distant bird. Then he would see far past the river winding in the distance. Then he would see what lay beyond the Forbidden Mountains. Maybe those big mountains right behind my head are the Forbidden Mountain, maybe farther away, you'll see. Lay beyond the Forbidden Mountains far to his right. Then he could detect the movement of the herds of animals that his tribe so badly needed to sustain them. And then he would lead the tribe to the game and be first in the hunt that would follow. If it might even be a herd of the mighty ones. The mighty ones, a herd of that. Let's see what that is. He returned to his task, chipping with a flint point upon a soft, flat stone. He was sketching the form of a mighty one. That was the name his people gave to the mammoth, the giant woolly elephant. The great, the mammoth, woolly mammoth. You guys know what that is. He bore down carefully. This was the hardest part, reproducing the long, wide curve of those fearsome tusks. His tongue stuck out at the edge of his mouth as he concentrated. There, he had them right, the tusks sweeping in a great arc toward the bulbous head. And he had done it entirely from memory. It had been many, many days since his people had seen a mighty one. On any other of the large animals they hunted for food, the bison and the wild horse and the reindeer. He gazed again at the rumpled plain below. There was no sign of game anywhere. By stretching, he could look down to the base of the limestone cliff. In its side was the cave the tribe had made its home. Some of his people were walking about and working near the mouth of the cavern. From here, they looked no bigger than ground squirrels. They had lived in the cave during the almost endless winter. It had sheltered them from the elements and protected them from their enemies. But now, with the time of thawing, which means springtime, they would have to move on. For when the game departed, the tribe must go too. It was a hard thing to leave the warmth and familiarity of the cave, but already stomachs were hollow for lack of meat. So you get the sense that these people don't farm. They don't raise animals or domesticated animals. They move wherever the herds go. Wherever the herds of animals go, they have to follow so that they can eat. The boy returned to the slab of stone. The likeness was a good one. Proudly, he scratched on the corner of the stone a symbol he had taken to signify that this was his work. It was a straight up and down line with a point on the end. He meant it to indicate a spear, for he thought of himself a hunter. Not yet a great hunter. It was true, since he had seen only 12 summers. So he's 12 years old. So just like Philip in our last book, this is Kimba, and he's also about 12, so around your age. He had never, in fact, hunted any large game, but he knew he would be a hunter, and a good hunter, perhaps the best of all of them. Every boy of the tribe became a hunter. That was the only way of life that a boy could conceive of. They didn't have jobs like, okay, you're a plumber and you're an electrician. They grow up and you're a hunter. Oh, and you also are a hunter. There was no other. But Kimba was different. He was not born of the tribe. He doesn't belong to, well, he belongs to this tribe now, but he wasn't born of this tribe. And he was being raised in another manner. The tribe did not expect Kimba to become a hunter. Gripping the flint tightly, Kimba retraced his drawing of the mammoth. They were immense, meaning enormous, the mighty ones. But that would not stop him. He would yet show the tribe that he could be a hunter. He imagined himself clenching his spear, circling a mighty one, measuring it, dashing in with a ringing cry. Kimba lay on his back, staring at the sky, visualizing his victory. Movement flashed before his eyes and roused him. It was a hawk gliding onto the lowest branch of a stunted black oak, rooted in the sandy soil. It was a small hawk, earth brown with red markings at the wingtips and near its eyes. Was it, he wondered, the same bird that had flown so low only moments before? Its unblinking eyes were fixed upon Kimba. He pursed his lips and whistled. The hawk cocked its head, still staring at him, and sounded an identical whistle. Again, Kimba whistled, a long, sweet trill. Hesitantly, the bird fluttered to the ground. It took several nervous steps toward him. Kimba extended his hand. He made his mind go blank, letting it be filled with feelings, not thought. They were the feelings of a small hawk, that a small hawk would experience. Feelings of freedom, ferocity, and the joy of flight. He let himself be one with these feelings and with this living creature. The hawk studied Kimba's hand, then walked to it. The boy lightly stroked the silken feathers. The bird shivered, but remained still. He had always been able to do this, to imitate the calls of birds and small animals, to charm them, to compel them to draw near. It had nothing to do with hunting. The tribe required large herds of animals in order to subsist. The tiny bright-eyed bird had no reason to fear him, and the boy knew this gift of his was of no practical use. You'll see that with early humans, with humans like these in Kimba's tribe, things were either useful or practical, or they weren't, and they didn't think about those things. He did not question how he was able to do it, but Utrecht said it was another sign that Kimba had the power. So you're starting to see Utrecht is somebody that feels Kimba has the power. And because Kimba has the power, they don't want him to become a hunter. They want him to become something else. And you also notice that this book is not written in first person like our last book, where Philip was our narrator. Now there's another narrator. Okay, and you remember what that was called. Okay, all right. Suddenly, the hawk shot into the air. A shadow fell across Kimba's body. The boy reached for a spear. Kimba! An old man loomed over him, angrily shaking a long staff. His legs were spindly and gray, dirt-stained hair all but covered his eyes. He was bent like an ancient tree. This was Utrecht, sorcerer of the tribe. Utrecht picked up the stone on which Kimba had been sketching. He looked from it to Kimba and back again. You were forbidden to come here today. His voice was a screech that sent shivers down the boy's spine. Yes, Utrecht. The sorcerer held out the stone with a trembling hand. And I did not tell you to make a mighty one. It was so. He had assigned Kimba to sketch a bison. But the boy's mind was alive with visions of the majestic mighty ones. He had meant to draw bison. He had just not gotten to it yet. Utrecht pointed a finger at Kimba, the forefinger of his left hand. He had only 2 fingers and a thumb on that hand, and he knew that this had always awed the boy. The boy had often wondered in what dreadful way the other 2 fingers had been lost. You must not dream your own dreams, Utrecht shouted. You have the power, but you must learn to use it for the tribe. You must not waste it. Kimba bit his lip. He dared not talk back. It could be most dangerous. Utrecht could do strange and marvelous things. It was the power that enabled Utrecht to paint so skillfully, to summon game, to interpret dreams, to heal, to recount the tribal legends, to work wonders. So now you're finding out what a sorcerer does. Summon game. What does summon mean? To bring forth, to call forth, to make happen, to materialize. Something interesting. So he summons game. Game is the herds and the food that the animals that they eat. Someday Kimba would do these things too. Someday he would master the power. So it had been decreed long before, when Kimba was so young that he could recall nothing else. But as he grew older, the prospect bewildered him, confused him. To have the power was a great gift, Utrecht said. But how was it great, Kimba wondered. The other boys did not spend their days carving on stone or mixing clay to make paints or carrying heavy loads of Utrecht's masks and ritual implements. The other boys were free to roam, free to practice spear throwing, free to perfect their skills as hunters. He's not doing that. I must punish you, Kimba. You must learn. Kimba's eyes dropped to the ground. He had been told before by Utrecht that he was a dreamer, an idler. Let someone else be trained then, he thought. Let someone else be found who has the power. This will be your punishment. Kimba knew he would not be struck. Utrecht had never done that. But his punishment would be working longer in the grotto with the sorcerer, hours when he could be outdoors. He would rather be beaten and be done with it. More dreary hours in that dank chamber on such a fine, clear day. He turned for a final look at the plain below. His gaze swept over the great expanse, then stopped abruptly. A mighty one. There! Utrecht squinted. Where? There. Ah, tell the tribe. Hurry, Kimba. The boy bolted for the rocky path. Utrecht hurried after him, leaning on his staff, wheezing as he made the steep descent. Kimba was already far below, sliding, running, kicking loose a torrent of pebbles. He was shouting before he reached the bottom of the cliff. A mighty one! I see it! A mighty one! The people of the tribe greeted him with shouts of their own. Where? Where? Kimba! There! Across the river! Excitement gripped them, game-sighted, after so many days of only roots, moss, and the inner bark of willows. Meat, fresh meat for all. So we got to see what they were eating in the meantime. Hunters, prepare. Rab's voice carried over the tumult. He clapped a hand on the boy's shoulder. Good work, Kimba. The hunters dashed for the cave to fetch their weapons. Rab, with Kimba at his side, led the way. Rab was spear maker for the tribe, so he made the spears, but he also is a hunter. It was he and his mate Erda who had taken Kimba in when the tribe had found him 10 summers before. Now Rab took his longest spear, a hardwood pike with a large sharp bone point securely lashed to it. He would need this rather than the flint-head spear to penetrate the thick hide of a mighty one. The throwing sticks and javelins the hunters carried when hunting smaller game would be useless. They need their big stuff. They need the big guns. Not really guns. That's just a figure of speech. Spears. Rab, Erda, and Kimba lived in a small niche near the mouth of the cave. Their fur bedding, their few utensils, and the many stone tools of Rab's trade littered the area. Other families occupied their own plots of territory throughout the wide cavern. No group would attempt to take over the space claimed by another. That was the rule of the tribe. Rab's face, he even had 40,000 years ago, and they even had rules back then. Rab's face shone. A mighty one, he told Erda excitedly. Hunt well, Erda smiled. She was taller than the other women of the tribe, almost as tall as the men, yet she was small-boned and graceful. Chestnut-colored hair fell to her shoulders, and her face was delicate and good-humored. Hunters, come, Rab cried as he ran back out into the sunlight. The other able-bodied men of the tribe, little more than a score, assembled around him. Now Utrecht made his way toward the hunters. His ribs rose and fell rapidly, for he was still fatigued by the climb down the cliff. Kimba grasped his spear tightly in both hands. It was the one that Rab had made for him the previous autumn. The spear was as tall as he was, yet nowhere near the length of the weapon held by the others. Utrecht shook his staff, and the hunters fell silent. Kimba, taking small steps to make his movements inconspicuous, sidled up to the edge of the cluster of hunters. Do you notice that Kimba's wanting to blend in so that he can go on the hunt? Eyes gleaming wildly, Utrecht uttered a piercing howl. It hung on the air, shrill and terrible for a moment. Then it ended, and Utrecht's staff lunged in the direction of the mighty one. Hunt and kill! He shrieked. The hunters let out a roar and began running toward the distant river. His throat dry with excitement, Kimba raced with them. Kimba! It was Utrecht shouting, come back! Rab spun around and saw him. The spearmaker let the other hunters stream past him. Go back, he commanded Kimba. I saw the mighty one first. You are too small to hunt yet. But I was first to go back. There was impatience in Rab's face. Kimba stamped his spear on the ground, angry too, but Rab could not be defied. Kimba turned slowly and made his way back to the cave. Utrecht took him by the ear, pinching it hard. You will work in the grotto from sunup to sunset tomorrow. I did not permit you to join the hunt. Your place is here with me. I saw the mighty one first. That does not matter. You are not a hunter. All right, this next chapter is really short, just like 3 or 4 pages. I'll go through it really quickly. Chapter 2. Kimba strode stiffly past the women and smaller children, conscious of their stares. Erda put her cool hand on his shoulder, and together they entered the cave. He sat cross-legged on his bearskin sleeping robe, keeping the spear in his hands, brooding. He would not look at Erda, so brooding must mean he's frustrated and angry, feeling sorry for himself. She smiled slightly and resumed her work, using a flint scraper to clean the flesh and fat from the hide of a small hare, Rabbit. It would be made into a pouch for Rab to carry flints with him as he hunted. The hare had been the only meat that Erda, Rab, and Kimba had tasted for a week. Erda offered Kimba the bulbs of some lilies that she had dug up that morning. He shook his head grumpily. Even though they were succulent looking, meaning they looked like they would be tasty, and he would have liked one, Erda bit off a piece of one of the bulbs. "Oh, good," she said, trying to tempt him. Kimba grunted. It was no time to think of food dug from the earth when a mighty one was being hunted. But he was still not a hunter, Utrecht had told him. He who had been first to see the mighty one, not a hunter, they would see. He would be a hunter yet. He did not want the power. What good was it, this power, if it meant working here with women and children while the hunters were out on the trail? "Tabak, have some." Erda extended a lily bulb to a snub-nosed boy who had joined them. Tabak was Kimba's closest friend, kind of like Heinrich von Boven in the cave. And now he nodded eagerly and quickly began to chewing it. "Kimba," Erda inquired, offering them again. Once more, Kimba shook his head. "Would you like to practice with the throwing sticks?" Tabak asked. Again, Kimba shook his head. To practice the ways of the hunters with one who was a summer younger than himself, while the hunters were after real game? But it was a good time to use the throwing sticks, Tabak pointed out. Utrecht had left Kimba free for now. A good time for children to play their games, Kimba thought. But what had that to do with real hunting? He also realized that Tabak might hit the target more often. This was because Tabak had more time to practice than Kimba, because Tabak did not have to attend to Utrecht for the better portion of each day. The prospect of being bested today by a younger boy would not improve his belief in himself as a hunter, Kimba knew. But then another thought came to him as he jumped up. "Very well, we will do as you say." He reached over and scooped up one of the bulbs. "Come, Tabak," he said quickly. The base of the cliff curved into a smooth and grassy glade, and here had been set up a life-size replica of a cave bear. So someone made a cave bear so it looks like a cave bear. Kimba himself had molded the bear 2 summers before, out of the umber clay that was so abundant after the melting of the snows. Utrecht had pronounced it an excellent likeness. Kimba had always been proud of his handiwork. The bear was gigantic, even on all fours, and seemed to snarl frighteningly. However, its coat was a mass of pockmarks from the spear and javelin thrusts it had absorbed, and part of its face had been obliterated. Tabak, son of Odlag, you're going to get to know all these weird names, and we'll have to write them down, but Tabak is another person, and Odlag is another person. But Tabak, who is his little friend right now, son of Odlag, had brought his father's throwing stick. A throwing stick was a small, stout piece of wood with a rawhide strap attached. The heel of a javelin, a shorter spear, almost a dart, was placed on this loop. With a deft thrust of the throwing stick, the javelin could be hurled faster and farther than thrown by hand. Have you ever seen those people that throw tennis balls for dogs, and sometimes they have that long stick, and on the end you can put the tennis ball? That's basically the same dynamics, and they use that to just throw it, because when you do that, you can throw the tennis ball farther. All right. Almost done, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I know it's a little bit longer reading each day than the K was. K's real short. Kimba and Tabak were the only males of the tribe past the age of childhood who were not yet hunters. There had been a third boy named Mrodag, but just one summer ago, when he was the age Kimba was now, Mrodag had been initiated into the ranks of the hunters. Now he would scarcely speak to his 2 former companions. He thinks he's too old for them. Tabak dropped to his knees and began creeping toward the clay animal. It's not a real animal, it's just a replica. When he was 20 paces from it, he leaped up, shouted, brought back his right arm, and unleashed the javelin. It wobbled in flight, but struck the bear's right shoulder and remained loosely embedded. Tabak gave a thin, yipping call of triumph. "Now you, Kimba." But Kimba was looking back at the cave. Ordinarily, many of the tribe would be visible. Now the hunters were gone, and the others were were within the cave, busy with chores or discussing the possibility of obtaining fresh meat. No one was to be seen. What's he thinking? That is my mighty one, Tabak, Kimba said, pointing in the direction that the hunters had gone. He walked farther along the base of the cliff toward some rocks that would block him from sight of the entrance of the cavern. You must not tell anyone what I am doing, he instructed the younger boy, especially you, Trek. Tabak stared in wonder. Kimba raised his spear and shook it ferociously. As hunters did, not a hunter they would see. He broke into a run. The other hunters had a long start on him, but he would catch up. Okay, that was pretty bad of him. He's going to try to go catch up to the hunters, even though he knows he's not supposed to, even though Rab, his kind of like his stepdad. Rab is his father that took him in when they found him, and you'll hear about that later. And now he's going to try to catch up. Okay, it'll say in the next chapter, you never go off alone. That's like the prime rule of the tribe. You never hunt alone. You never go somewhere alone. Okay. Well, I better get down to the bottom here. I keep coming back to the top of the hill. So this time I'm going to fly all the way down the bottom, but I don't want you guys to see that because our video is ending now. So I will see you next time, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.